You know what's strange about people who never ask for help? Most of them are the people everyone else relies on, the friend who always answers, the person who says, "I'll handle it." The one who somehow keeps functioning no matter how overwhelmed they actually are. And after a while, people stop checking on them because they seem strong. But psychology suggests something much deeper is happening beneath that independence. Because people who never ask for help are usually not cold, emotionless, or naturally self-sufficient. Most of the time, they simply learned very early that vulnerability did not feel safe at some point in life. Their brain absorbed a quiet but powerful lesson: if I depend on people too much, I'll get hurt. And once your nervous system learns that, it changes the way you move through the world. You stop expressing needs, stop reaching out, stop expecting support. Not because you don't want comfort, because depending on people starts feeling emotionally dangerous. Psychologists actually have a name for this pattern: avoidant attachment. Children who grow up emotionally unsupported often adapt by becoming extremely self-reliant. If expressing emotions led to criticism, if asking for help led to disappointment, vulnerability was ignored or treated like weakness. The brain adapts. Instead of expecting support, the child learns to survive alone, and years later, that child becomes the adult who says, "I'm fine, don't worry about me, I got it," even when they're emotionally exhausted inside. What makes this psychology difficult to recognize is that hyper-independent people often look incredibly functional from the outside. They go to work, take care of responsibilities, reply to messages, support everybody else emotionally. Meanwhile, their own stress keeps building silently in the background, and eventually, carrying everything alone starts feeling normal. That's the dangerous part. The nervous system adapts to emotional overload the same way your eyes adapt to darkness. After long enough, exhaustion becomes familiar, loneliness becomes routine, emotional suppression becomes personality, and many people stop asking for help not because they're okay, but because they genuinely forget support is even an option. There's also another layer to this psychology: control. People who never ask for help often feel safest when they're completely in control of everything: their emotions, their environment, their problems, their responsibilities. Because control creates predictability, and predictability feels safe to a brain that spent years preparing for disappointment. But human beings were never designed to carry life completely alone. Neuroscientists have found that emotional support directly affects stress hormones, anxiety levels, and even physical health. Your nervous system literally regulates itself through safe human connection. In other words, needing support is not weakness, it's biology. But for hyper-independent people, asking for help often creates anxiety instead of relief. Because asking requires vulnerability, and vulnerability feels risky when your brain associates dependence with pain. So instead, they minimize everything. It's not a big deal, I'm just tired. Other people have it worse. Meanwhile, they're carrying emotional weight that would overwhelm most people. And the strange part is, they often don't even realize how overwhelmed they are, because overfunctioning became their identity. They became the strong one, the reliable friend, the calm partner, the responsible sibling. Everybody leans on them, but almost nobody asks who they lean on. And honestly, many of them don't know anymore. You can see this pattern clearly in relationships. One person openly communicates emotional needs. The other quietly handles everything alone. At first, it looks mature, independent, easygoing, but over time, emotional distance slowly grows. Because even though they never directly ask for support, part of them still hopes someone will notice their pain without forcing them to explain it. And that's one of the saddest parts of this psychology. People who never ask for help often secretly wish someone would understand them without them having to say anything. Not because they're manipulative, because explaining their needs feels emotionally unsafe. So instead, they withdraw, become quieter, more emotionally distant. And eventually people assume they're okay, they don't need anyone. But many times, that person needed support long before they disappeared emotionally. There's another irony here that psychologists often notice. The people who struggle most with receiving help are usually the first people to help everyone else. They will stay up all night supporting a friend, drop everything for someone they care about, listen to everybody's problems without complaint, but when it comes to their own pain, they suddenly become silent. Why? Because deep down, many hyper-independent people believe their value comes from being useful, not vulnerable, not emotional, not needy, useful. And if your worth becomes tied to usefulness, asking for help starts feeling like failure. Now, to be fair, not everyone who avoids asking for help is deeply wounded. Some people are naturally private. Some genuinely enjoy solving problems alone. Healthy independence absolutely exists. But healthy independence says, I can handle things myself. Hyper-independence says, I have to handle everything myself because nobody else feels safe. One comes from confidence, the other comes from survival. And survival patterns are hard to recognize because society rewards them. People praise the person who never complains, the person who quietly carries everything, the person who never becomes too much. But very few people notice the emotional cost behind that strength, the burnout, the emotional exhaustion, the loneliness, and eventually, many hyper-independent people stop feeling emotionally safe around anyone. They become uncomfortable receiving kindness, suspicious of unconditional support, restless when they are not useful to somebody else, because usefulness became identity. And maybe that's the real tragedy of people who never ask for help. The people most deserving of support are often the least likely to ask for it. So if this feels familiar, hear this clearly. You are not weak for having emotional needs. You are not difficult for struggling. Sometimes. And allowing yourself to lean on somebody does not erase your strength. In fact, it may be one of the strongest things you ever do. Because real strength is not suffering silently until you collapse in private. Real strength is trusting that you do not have to survive everything alone. And maybe healing begins the moment you stop seeing vulnerability as danger and start seeing it as connection. If this resonated with you, you're probably not the only one. There are far more people silently carrying everything alone than anyone realizes.